Right now, as you're watching this, someone somewhere is using psychological techniques so subtle, so powerful, that their target has no idea they're being influenced. These aren't the cheesy pickup lines you've heard 1,000 times or the superficial dating advice that floods social media. What I'm about to reveal to you are 7 dark psychology techniques rooted in decades of behavioral research, techniques that bypass conscious resistance and speak directly to the subconscious mind. But here's the thing that most men don't understand. True influence isn't about manipulation for its own sake. It's about understanding the fundamental psychological drivers that create genuine attraction and connection. The difference between a man who struggles with dating and a man who effortlessly draws people into his world isn't luck, genetics, or money. It's knowledge. It's understanding how the human mind actually works beneath the surface of polite conversation and social pretense. Before we dive deep into these techniques, I need you to understand something crucial. What separates the truly magnetic man from the average guy who gets friend-zoned repeatedly isn't just confidence or looks. It's his ability to create what psychologists call unconscious rapport and cognitive resonance. When you master these 7 techniques, you'll notice something extraordinary happening in your interactions. People will find themselves drawn to you without being able to articulate exactly why. They'll think about you when you're not around. They'll seek your approval and validation in ways that seem natural to them, but are actually the result of carefully applied psychological principles. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. This is about becoming the most strategically effective version of yourself. The first technique is what Robert Cialdini calls the commitment and consistency principle. But I'm going to show you how to weaponize it in a way that creates deep emotional investment. Most men make the mistake of trying to convince women they're worthy of attention through logical arguments about their accomplishments, their potential, or their good intentions. This approach fails because it positions you as someone seeking approval rather than someone worth pursuing. Instead, you want to get her to convince herself that she's interested in you. Here's how this works on a psychological level. When someone takes a small action that aligns with a particular identity or belief, their mind automatically adjusts their self-perception to remain consistent with that action. The key is getting her to take progressively larger actions that demonstrate her interest in you, without her consciously recognizing that she's doing so. Start with what I call micro-investments. These are tiny commitments that feel completely natural but create psychological momentum. Instead of asking for her number directly, you might say something like, "I'm heading to this underground art exhibition next weekend that most people don't know about." It's the kind of thing where you either get it or you don't. "What's your number? I'll let you know if I think you'd appreciate it." Notice what just happened there. She's not just giving you her number because you asked for it. She's giving it to you because she wants to be the kind of person who gets sophisticated art, who's invited to exclusive experiences, who's worthy of your selective judgment. You've positioned her number not as a favor to you, but as access to an identity she wants to embody. Once you have that initial micro-investment, you escalate through what behavioral economists call the escalation of commitment. Each subsequent interaction should require slightly more investment from her, while feeling completely organic. Maybe you text her about the art exhibition, but instead of just inviting her, you say, "I've been thinking about our conversation, and I think you might actually have the kind of perspective that would make this interesting. But I'm curious about something first." Then you ask her a question that requires her to invest mental energy in crafting a thoughtful response. She's not just responding to your text, she's demonstrating her intellectual capacity to someone whose opinion she's beginning to value. The psychological mechanism at work here is profound. Every time she invests effort in your interaction, whether it's crafting a thoughtful text, dressing nicely for a date, or even just thinking about you, her subconscious mind interprets this investment as evidence of her own interest. Humans have an extraordinary need for cognitive consistency. If she's spending significant mental and emotional energy on you, her mind will automatically generate reasons why you must be worth that investment. This creates what psychologists call a self-reinforcing attribution cycle. The more effort she puts in, the more interested she becomes, which leads to more effort, which creates deeper interest. The second technique leverages what's known in psychological literature as intermittent reinforcement, but I'm going to show you how to apply it in a way that creates what I call addictive uncertainty. This principle was first identified by B.F. Skinner in his operant conditioning experiments. where he discovered that behaviors reinforced on an unpredictable schedule become incredibly persistent and resistant to extinction. Think about why people become addicted to gambling, social media, or even checking their phones. It's not because these activities always provide satisfaction. It's because they sometimes provide satisfaction, and the brain can't predict when that satisfaction will come. Most relationships fail because they become predictable. Once she knows exactly how you'll respond, when you'll text back and what you'll say, the psychological tension that creates attraction begins to dissipate. Your goal is to become what I call strategically unpredictable. This doesn't mean being inconsistent with your core values or being unreliable in important matters. It means being unpredictable in ways that create positive tension and maintain her psychological investment in figuring you out. Here's how you implement this practically. In your texting patterns, never fall into a predictable rhythm. Sometimes respond immediately, sometimes wait hours, sometimes send a long, thoughtful message, sometimes just send an emoji or a single word that forces her to interpret your meaning. The key is ensuring that your unpredictability feels intentional rather than chaotic. When you do respond quickly, make it count. When you delay, make sure your eventual response justifies the wait. This creates what neurologists call dopamine anticipation cycles. Her brain starts releasing dopamine not just when she receives your attention, but in anticipation of potentially receiving your attention. Apply this same principle to your availability and attention. Be completely present and engaged when you're with her, but don't be constantly available. Have periods where you're genuinely occupied with your own pursuits, goals, and interests. When you resurface, bring something interesting from your absence. This could be a story, an insight, a new experience, or even just a different energy. The message you're sending is that your life is rich and engaging even without her in it, which paradoxically makes her want to be more involved in it. The psychological mechanism here taps into what's called the variable ratio reinforcement schedule, which creates the strongest and most persistent behavioral patterns. She begins to associate you with that feeling of excitement and anticipation that comes from not knowing exactly what to expect. This is the same psychological dynamic that makes people addicted to certain video games, social media platforms, or even relationships with emotionally unavailable partners. The difference is that you're creating this dynamic consciously and strategically, while maintaining your integrity and genuine care for her well-being. The third technique is based on what psychologists call the scarcity principle, combined with social proof theory. But I'm going to show you how to create what I call selective availability. This isn't about playing hard to get in some juvenile way. This is about understanding a fundamental truth about human psychology. We value what we have to work for, and we desire what others desire. The men who are most successful with women understand that attraction isn't created by being readily available to everyone. It's created by being highly valuable to a select few. Here's what most men don't understand about scarcity. It's not about being difficult or withholding yourself arbitrarily. True scarcity comes from having genuine standards and a life that's so engaging that not everyone gets access to your time and attention. When you have real standards based on compatibility, values, and genuine connection, rather than just physical attraction, you naturally become more selective. This selectivity communicates value in a way that no amount of bragging or self-promotion ever could. Start by developing what I call earned intimacy. This means that access to different levels of your attention, time, and emotional availability must be earned through her demonstrating qualities you genuinely value. Maybe anyone can have a surface-level conversation with you, but only someone who shows intellectual curiosity gets to engage with your deeper thoughts. Only someone who demonstrates emotional maturity gets to see your vulnerable side. Only someone who shows genuine interest in your goals and ambitions gets invited into your inner world. The key is making these standards clear through your behavior rather than your words. Never explain your standards or justify your selectivity. Simply embody it. When she meets one of your standards, acknowledge it and allow her slightly deeper access. When she doesn't, maintain your boundaries without explanation or judgment. This creates what psychologists call approach motivation. She begins to see access to you as something to be earned rather than something she's entitled to. Social proof works in tandem with scarcity to create what I call triangular desire. This is based on the work of René Girard, who observed that human desire is fundamentally mimetic. We want what others want. When other people, especially people she respects or sees as similar to herself, clearly value your time and attention, her own perception of your worth increases automatically. This doesn't mean flaunting other women in front of her or playing ridiculous games. It means cultivating a life where you're genuinely valued by multiple people for legitimate reasons. Develop meaningful friendships with both men and women. Pursue interests that connect you with communities of like-minded people. Build professional relationships where your skills and character are recognized and appreciated. When she sees that you're not just someone trying to get her attention, but someone who has earned the respect and affection of others, her attraction to you deepens. She begins to see being chosen by you as a reflection of her own worth and desirability. The fourth technique leverages what psychologists call the contrast principle and perceptual contrast effects, but I'm going to show you how to create what I call emotional amplitude. This principle was extensively studied by Robert Cialdini and involves the way our perception of something is influenced by what we experience immediately before it. A moderately attractive person appears more attractive after we've been shown less attractive people. A reasonable price seems like a great deal after we've seen much higher prices. The same principle applies to emotions and experiences in relationships. Most men create flat emotional experiences. They're consistently nice, consistently available, consistently predictable. While this might seem like the safe approach, it actually creates emotional numbness. The brain adapts to consistent stimulation and stops responding to it with the same intensity. This is why long-term relationships often feel less exciting than new ones, and why some people become addicted to the intensity of dramatic, unstable relationships. Your goal is to create positive emotional contrast while maintaining your core integrity and values. This means creating peaks and valleys in her emotional experience with you, where the valleys aren't negative experiences, but rather periods of normal baseline interaction, and the peaks are moments of intense connection, excitement, or revelation. The contrast between these states makes the peaks feel even more significant and memorable. Practically, this means varying the intensity and depth of your interactions. Sometimes engage in light, playful banter that's fun, but doesn't require deep emotional investment. Other times, create moments of profound connection where you share something meaningful about yourself, or invite her to share something meaningful about herself. Sometimes be physically playful and flirtatious. Other times, be intellectually stimulating and challenging. The key is that she never knows which version of you she's going to get, which keeps her psychologically engaged and prevents her from taking your attention for granted. This principle also applies to the environments and experiences you create together. Instead of defaulting to dinner and a movie every time, create varied experiences that generate different types of emotions and memories. Take her somewhere that challenges her physically. Invite her to something that stimulates her intellectually. Create an experience that allows her to see you in your element, demonstrating competence and passion. Each different type of experience creates different neural pathways and associations with you in her mind. The psychological mechanism at work here is what neuroscientists call memory consolidation through emotional salience. Experiences that generate strong emotions are more likely to be remembered vividly and to influence future decision-making. By creating varied emotional experiences, you're ensuring that her memories of you are vivid, numerous, and associated with positive feelings. This makes you more psychologically present in her mind, even when you're not physically present. The fifth technique is based on what psychologists call the Benjamin Franklin effect and cognitive dissonance theory, but I'm going to show you how to create what I call investment amplification. This principle is based on a counterintuitive discovery. People actually like us more after they do us a favor, not less. The traditional understanding would suggest that doing favors for someone makes them like us more. While this can be true, the reverse effect is actually more powerful and more psychologically sticky. The mechanism works through cognitive dissonance. When someone does you a favor, especially if they didn't initially feel particularly close to you, their mind has to justify why they would take action to help you. The easiest justification is that they must like you more than they initially realized. This creates a positive feedback loop where small favors lead to increased affection, which makes them more willing to do larger favors, which increases their affection even further. The key is asking for favors that feel meaningful to her but aren't burdensome. These should be requests that allow her to demonstrate something she's proud of: her knowledge, her skills, her connections, or her taste. For example, Instead of asking her what her favorite restaurant is, you might say, "I'm taking a client somewhere impressive next week, and I know you have incredible taste. What place would you recommend that would really make an impression?" This positions her as an expert whose opinion you value, and the favor she's doing isn't just giving you information. It's sharing her sophisticated judgment. As the relationship develops, gradually escalate the significance of what you're asking for, always ensuring that your requests allow her to feel good about herself while helping you. Maybe you ask for her opinion on something related to your career goals. Maybe you invite her to help you choose between options for something meaningful to you. Maybe you ask her to teach you something she's genuinely skilled at. Each time she invests effort in helping you, she becomes more psychologically committed to your success and happiness. This technique works because it reverses the typical power dynamic where men try to win women over by doing things for them. Instead, you're creating situations where she's investing in you, which makes her feel more connected to your outcomes. She begins to see your success as partially her success because she contributed to it. Your happiness becomes more important to her because she played a role in creating it. The sixth technique leverages what psychologists call social mirroring and the chameleon effect, but I'm going to show you how to create what I call selective synchronization. This principle is based on decades of research showing that people feel more connected to others who subtly mirror their behavior, speech patterns, and energy levels. However, most people apply this principle too broadly and end up seeming inauthentic or losing their own identity in the process. The key is understanding that effective mirroring isn't about copying everything she does. It's about selectively synchronizing with aspects of her communication and behavior that represent her positive qualities while maintaining your own distinct identity. This creates a sense of familiarity and connection without sacrificing the mystery and individuality that makes you attractive. Start by paying attention to her communication style when she's at her best, when she's passionate about something, when she's feeling confident, when she's being genuinely herself rather than trying to impress you. Notice her pace of speech, her energy level, the types of words she uses, her sense of humor. Then, in moments when you want to create deeper connection, subtly match these elements while still being authentically yourself. If she speaks with passion and intensity when discussing something she cares about, allow your own passion and intensity to show when you're discussing something you care about. If she has a particular type of humor, dry wit, playful teasing, clever wordplay, incorporate elements of that humor style into your own interactions with her, but through the lens of your own personality and experiences. If she values deep philosophical conversations, engage with her on that level, but bring your own perspectives and insights rather than simply agreeing with everything she says. The psychological principle at work here is what researchers call in-group identification. When people perceive similarities between themselves and others, especially similarities in values, communication styles, and ways of thinking, they automatically categorize those others as part of their in-group. This categorization triggers a host of positive biases, including increased trust, more generous interpretations of behavior, and stronger emotional connection. However, the synchronization must be selective and authentic. If you mirror everything, you lose your distinct identity and become psychologically invisible. If you mirror nothing, you remain foreign and potentially incompatible. The art is in finding the aspects of her personality that genuinely resonate with aspects of your own personality, and then allowing those resonances to be more visible in your interactions with her. The seventh and most powerful technique is based on what psychologists call intermittent vulnerability and strategic self-disclosure, but I'm going to show you how to create what I call controlled emotional access. This technique is perhaps the most sophisticated because it requires genuine self-awareness and emotional intelligence. Most men either share too much too quickly, which creates the impression of neediness or instability, or they share too little, which prevents deep connection from forming. The principle works by understanding that vulnerability creates connection, but only when it's offered from a position of strength rather than weakness. When you share something personal or vulnerable about yourself, you're offering her emotional access to your inner world. This access feels like a privilege when it's selectively granted, but it feels like a burden when it's desperately dumped on her. True strategic vulnerability involves sharing personal information that reveals your depth, your growth, your values, or your humanity, but only in contexts where she's demonstrated that she can handle that level of intimacy appropriately. It's not about sharing your deepest fears or insecurities with someone you barely know. It's about gradually revealing layers of yourself as she proves herself worthy of deeper access. Start with what I call strength-based vulnerability. These are personal stories or admissions that reveal something meaningful about your character, while demonstrating your ability to handle challenges, learn from mistakes, or maintain your values under pressure. For example, you might share a story about a time when you had to make a difficult ethical decision, or when you failed at something important and what you learned from that failure, or when you had to overcome a significant challenge. The key is that these revelations should make her respect you more, not less. They should give her insight into why you are the way you are, what shapes your values, and what drives your decisions. They should make you more three-dimensional and interesting, not more needy or unstable. When shared appropriately, these moments of vulnerability create what psychologists call intimacy escalation, a deepening sense of connection and trust. As she responds appropriately to your vulnerability, with empathy, understanding, or her own appropriate vulnerability, you can gradually share more personal aspects of yourself. This creates a dynamic where intimacy becomes something you build together, rather than something you dump on her. She begins to feel special because she has access to parts of you that others don't see, and she begins to invest more deeply in the relationship because she's been trusted with increasingly personal information. Throughout all of these techniques, there's a crucial underlying principle that separates ethical influence from manipulation: genuine care for her well-being and happiness. These techniques work because they align with natural psychological processes that create connection and attraction. They're not about tricking someone into liking you against their better judgment. They're about presenting yourself in ways that allow your genuine value to be recognized and appreciated. The difference between influence and manipulation lies in your intentions and outcomes. If you're using these techniques to create a connection with someone who is genuinely compatible with you, and if the relationship that develops is mutually beneficial and satisfying, then you're simply being strategically effective in your approach to dating and relationships. If you're using these techniques to manipulate someone into a relationship that's not in their best interest, then you're crossing ethical lines. Remember that all of these techniques require you to actually be someone worth knowing. You can't create lasting attraction without having genuine value to offer. These psychological principles amplify and reveal your existing qualities. They don't create qualities that don't exist. The most important work you can do is developing yourself into someone who genuinely deserves the kind of connection and relationship you want to create. The foundation of all effective influence is authentic self-improvement. Build a life that's genuinely interesting and fulfilling. Develop skills that you're passionate about. Cultivate relationships that enrich your existence. Pursue goals that challenge and inspire you. Create experiences that generate stories worth telling. When you have genuine value to offer, these psychological techniques simply help ensure that your value is recognized and appreciated. Understanding these 7 techniques: commitment and consistency, escalation, intermittent reinforcement patterning, selective availability creation, emotional amplitude management, investment amplification, selective synchronization, and controlled emotional access, gives you a significant advantage in creating the kind of deep, lasting attraction that leads to meaningful relationships. But remember that they're tools, not destinations. The goal isn't to become someone who manipulates others into liking them. The goal is to become someone so genuinely attractive that others naturally want to be around them, and then to use these techniques to facilitate and deepen those natural connections. When you master these principles, you'll notice that your interactions with women, and with people in general, become more effortless and more satisfying. You'll find that people are drawn to you without being able to articulate exactly why. You'll discover that the relationships you form are deeper and more resilient because they're based on genuine psychological connection rather than superficial attraction or artificial chemistry. The most successful men in dating and relationships aren't those who are naturally gifted or exceptionally attractive. They're those who understand how human psychology actually works and who apply that understanding with integrity and genuine care for others. They're men who have done the inner work to become genuinely valuable and who then present that value in ways that allow it to be fully appreciated. These techniques aren't shortcuts to avoid personal development. They're accelerators that help you translate your personal development into real-world results. They're frameworks that help you navigate the complex psychological landscape of human attraction and connection with greater skill and effectiveness. Master them, Apply them ethically and watch as your dating life transforms from a source of frustration into a source of fulfillment and growth.